Hey guys, I'm going to walk you through the lecture on Congress. So, one of the most important things to understand about Congress is that it is the most important branch of government. It makes law, it is the first branch of government mentioned in the Constitution, and the framers thought that it would be the most powerful entity in government. Congress has a checkered history. While it is critically important to lawmaking and governing, it also is one of the least popular government institutions. So, first, we're going to discuss the power problem with Congress. So, the power problem is the idea that you want to make sure that you give government enough power to carry out its duty, but not enough power that you can't regulate it. So, Congress's problem when it comes to this notion is effectiveness. Congress is largely unable to get things done. Now, they're slow in the lawmaking process. They're slow in the oversight process. They're slow when it comes to constituency service. However, it's not entirely their fault that the process is slow. Congress is created in a manner that not only encourages but rewards slow, methodical, sort of plodding through governmental processes. So, Congress is a representative body, meaning they have to represent the interests of many different groups and many different interests. And as such, they have to engage in negotiating, they have to engage in bargaining and compromise. The values of bargaining and representation and collaboration and conversation are at odds with quick and efficient movement. It's not easy to move quickly and make sure that the voices of multiple constituencies are all heard. So Congress moves slowly and deliberately, but it's not entirely the fault of Congress. Now, Congress has four main functions. They have a lawmaking function, a representative function, an oversight function, and a constituency service function. So we'll go through each one of these in detail. So the lawmaking body of Congress, how a bill becomes a law, is one of the most important functions of a congressional entity. They make law, and those laws end up being the framework for democracy in America. Now, there are lots of models of how a bill becomes a law. You can Google diagrams, you can see flow charts, there are videos on YouTube. One of the most effective videos is Schoolhouse Rock's How a Bill Becomes a Law. It's easy, it's catchy, and it is a really effective process illustrating how that works. So I would recommend that when you get a minute, you jump onto YouTube, you watch Schoolhouse Rocks, How a Bill, I'm Just a Bill, and it'll be a really informative look at how a bill becomes a law. But I'm going to use a diagram to walk you through the process. So, what I want you to think about is this sort of continuous process that's very fluid, that it's not necessarily that these steps are all happening independent of each other. At times, there's more than one thing going on, there's more than one discussion being had. So, the first thing that happens is a bill or an idea is introduced in either the House or the Senate. That bill is then assigned to a committee. They discuss it, and they can do one of three things. They can kill it or eliminate it. They can send the bill to the floor, so the committee can vote to send it to the entire either House or Senate, or they can amend or mark up the bill and then vote on those changes in committee. Once that process happens, the bill is sent to the floor and it is discussed and voted upon. Now, The discussion varies a bit in the different chambers of Congress. So in the House, conversation is more informal, where in the Senate, it is much more formal. If that bill is voted upon and accepted, then the bill will move to the other chamber of Congress. So if the bill starts in the House and is voted upon and accepted, then it will move to the Senate and vice versa. The process then repeats itself. One important thing to remember is that a bill must be voted upon and accepted in the same version in both houses, with chambers. What that means is the Senate could not vote on one bill and then the House vote on a bill with different language and end up passing both of those bills simultaneously. The bills need to be the same before they are sent to the president's desk. So once a bill is accepted in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, the bill goes to the president. And the president has several options. The president can sign the bill into law. The president can veto a bill, all right, or eliminate a bill. Now, the presidential veto can be overridden by a 2/3 majority vote in both houses. So a 2/3 majority vote in the Senate and a 2/3 majority vote in the House of Representatives. But that doesn't happen very often. All right, less than 4% of all bills that presidents have vetoed have ever been overridden. It just doesn't happen very, very, very often at all. In addition, the president can do two other things. He can allow a bill to become a law without his signature. So if he gets a bill that's been approved by both chambers of Congress, he cannot sign the bill, and if Congress is still in session for 10 days, that bill becomes a law. In addition, the president can refuse to sign the bill, and if Congress adjourns, then that bill is vetoed. Both of these are strategic options by a president that doesn't necessarily want to veto a bill, but also may not want that bill to become law. It's important to understand that there are many bills introduced, but very few actually end up becoming law. So out of the roughly 14,000 bills that are presented to Congress in a given year, only about 400, or about 3%, of all bills introduced actually become law. In addition, bills are becoming significantly longer. So the Social Security Act, which is the sort of underpinning or the foundation for the entirety of our Social Security system, was 2.5 pages. Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, was 906 pages. What this means in reality is that congressmen are less likely to be reading the entirety of bills. You only need to turn on the news to see that congressmen are willing to get on the news and talk about bills, and then we find out that they haven't even read them. So this is becoming a growing problem for our democracy. The second major function of Congress is representative. So a congressman's job is to represent the people who voted for them. There are several theories of representation. There's a delegate theory, there's a trustee theory, and there's a Politico theory. So delegate offers that an elected official has an obligation to do what their constituents want them to do. Oops, sorry about that. Has an obligation to do what their constituents want them to do, regardless of their own personal beliefs. So if you're an elected official who operates under the delegate model, you believe that your responsibility is to the people. It doesn't matter your own personal opinion. You should do what the people want you to do. The problem with this model is what happens when people are not aware of what they want to do. You know, if people don't have the necessary information to know what might be best for them in a given situation. The trustee model argues that The job of an elected official is to do what they believe is best, regardless of the will of the people. So if a congressman believes that they should vote for a bill, even though it's not publicly popular, they should do that because that's what they were elected to do. The Politico model says that it should be a blending of both the delegate and the trustee model. That essentially there are times where you should vote based on what you believe. There are times that you should follow the will of the people, and that you have to be strategic in those decisions. The third function of Congress is oversight. One of Congress's most important jobs is to ensure that other branches of government are doing what they are supposed to do. So Congress makes sure that laws are being faithfully executed. So they make sure that the president is following laws. They make sure that the courts are sort of operating in the way that they're supposed to. They also sort of have some oversight of the bureaucracy or the basically the structures that make government work. The challenge is anytime Congress and the president are of the same party, this oversight function can become a bit more complex because Republicans don't want to undermine Republicans, Democrats don't want to undermine Democrats, and so that primary oversight function becomes a bit muddled when we sort of see it applied in a partisan fashion. Another job of Congress is to investigate scandals. So when things are not going well and they believe that there's an entity in government that has overstepped its boundaries or is operating in an unethical manner, then it is Congress's job to investigate. So, again, the challenge here is what happens when these entities that are supposed to investigate the government are not investigating the government. So how do we basically force a group that is supposed to be engaging in oversight to engage in that oversight? What happens if a government oversight agency is working in a partisan fashion or is trying to advance a partisan agenda? How do we deal with that? How do we move forward? And what does that mean for our democracy? The final oversight function of Congress is through confirmation hearings. So they operate in a way that allows them to basically advise and consent to the president's appointment of certain people. So Congress will hold oversight hearings to ensure that a particular appointee or potential appointee, nominee, meets the criteria that Congress believes is necessary to hold a particular position. Now, over time, we have seen these become more and more partisan. So basically, Democrats are approving almost anybody that a Democrat puts forth. Republicans are approving almost anybody that a Republican puts forth. And so again, this oversight function becomes muddled because what is good for the party takes precedence over what is good for the country. Now, I do want to say that it is possible that what is good for the country is also good for the party. So there are times where what's good for the public is also really, really good for a particular party. But those two things don't always coincide with one another. Next, and the final sort of function of Congress is constituency service. So how congressmen deal with the public, how they interact with the public, how they serve their particular constituencies. And you have to remember that congressmen have multiple constituencies. So a congressman who is elected in, let's say, in Dalton, is not only bound to those who voted for him or her in Dalton, but also those who didn't vote for him or her, and those who didn't vote at all. The constituency is still the entire body of the people, not just the people who voted for a particular candidate. So operating in a way that allows someone to serve all of the people in the most effective way that they can is a really, really difficult component of a congressman's job. So they have to figure out, as they're engaging in constituency service, how to navigate between their sort of personal style and their home style. So personal style is the tactics that they use in Congress, so on Capitol Hill, in Washington. And a lot of the influence of congressmen are based on their ability to make relationships, to form alliances with critical players in the political game. Their ability to use log rolling and earmarking, so techniques to add things that you want onto existing bills, their ability to do that makes them a more effective congressman. And the more that they're able to illustrate that they have these set of skills, the more proficient and effective they'll become in legislating. Home style refers to how they deal with their constituents at home. All right. So how do they take certain policy positions, and how will those policy positions affect the way that people in their hometown think about them? So you've got to make sure that you deal with your geographic constituencies, your reelection constituencies, your primary constituencies, meaning sometimes you have to make strategic moves about, look, this isn't great for my community at large, but it's really good for the group that tends to go out and vote. So you have to balance whether or not your preference and your preferences to sort of deal with one constituency is better than dealing with another. So do you want to make your community happy, or do you want to make the group that tends to vote for you happy? So trying to balance that is really, really difficult. So I mentioned earmarking before, the ability to add money onto a bill in order to benefit your own constituency. So you add something to the healthcare bill that's going to benefit Dalton. And some earmarks are really important earmarks, others are a bit more frivolous. So there are some earmarks that are really, really good earmarks in the sense that they go towards projects that end up being very effective and efficient. There are also earmarks that are frivolous. So they're just added on, they benefit one place, they don't benefit anybody else other than the people in that particular area. So there's arguments for this and against it. So the arguments for it are that some earmarks are necessary. There are public works and public safety earmarks, parks and public spaces that really help to sort of build infrastructure. It's also part of the normal give and take of Congress. It's part of how Congress operates and how Congress works. Without it, you end up in gridlock. And even though the numbers might seem large, they make up a small percentage of the budget. So even though the numbers are large, it only makes up 1% of the federal budget. The arguments against it is that it's undemocratic. It focuses on individual locales and individual congressmen and their ability to negotiate and broker deals. It could also be expensive and unnecessary. It's also often linked with other things that end up saving certain groups a lot of money. And it just creates partisan talking points. It gives Democrats ammunition, it gives Republicans ammunition, and that's really what it does. So this just illustrates some of the types of earmarks that have been added to bills in the past. And you can see, $30,000 to refurnish picnic tables in Iowa might not seem like a big deal, but $650 million to add digital converter boxes, or $54 million to elevate wine tracks in Napa, add up quickly. And you end up with tens of millions of dollars in sort of excessive costs added onto bills. So, next we're going to shift to the organization of Congress. So, Congress is organized by committees. All right, Congress is a bicameral legislature, meaning it is a two-chamber or two-house legislature. So there is a House of Representatives and there is a Senate. Each chamber of Congress, both the House and the Senate, establishes committees, they hire staff, they have their own individual leadership, and organization within a particular area is based almost entirely on your party strength, meaning your numbers in either the House or the Senate. So if your party controls the House or controls the Senate, you wield a lot of power. If you're able to control both, you wield a tremendous amount of power. And power lies in the leadership of both of these entities. So, for example, the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader are the two most powerful positions in Congress. The Senate Majority and Speaker of the House have such powerful positions because they are the gatekeepers to what actually makes it to the floor. So nothing can make it to the floor for a vote without the approval of the Senate Majority Leader and or the Speaker of the House. They're very prestigious positions. They're very visible positions. They wield a lot of authority. They regularly get to meet and converse with the president. So they're real positions of influence. Everything in Congress is broken into committees. The detailed work of Congress takes place in committees. I'll say that again. The detailed work of Congress takes place in committees. Almost everything important that Congress does is based in a committee structure. You want to, as a congressman, get put on a committee that is prestigious and has influence, will help them to get reelected, deals with an area of expertise that they have. And these positions end up being critically important because the balance of power on these committees largely dictates the policy directions that we move in. There are 4 types of committees to be familiar with. There are standing committees. These are committees that exist that are permanent committees. So they exist no matter who the president is, right? So there are defense committees. There are budget committees. These exist regardless of the president and regardless of the administration. There are joint committees. These are committees that have members of both the House and the Senate that are concerned with a specific policy area. So there is a joint committee on Russia interference into the 2016 election. There are members from the House, there are members of the Senate. There are also conference committees. Conference committees are similar to joint committees in that they have both members of the House and the Senate on them, but their primary task is to reconcile the difference between a House and Senate bill. Finally, there are select committees. These are committees that conduct special investigations that are temporary. So there were select committees on 9/11. There were select committees on steroids in baseball. There were select committees on head trauma in football. They're not permanent, but they are committees that exist for a specific purpose for a singular amount of time. There are also some fundamental differences between the House and the Senate in terms of the membership and the requirements. The House is much larger. It has 435 members. They are based on proportional representation, meaning the more people you have in your state, the more representatives you will have in the House. They serve 2-year terms, and you must be 25 years old, a U.S. citizen for 7 years, and a legal resident of the state. The primary responsibilities and functions of the House are money bills. Every spending bill originates in the House of Representatives. It is supposed to be the body that is closest to the people. They also start impeachment proceedings. Again, because they're close to the people and they're supposed to reflect the will of the people. The Senate is a more formal body. There are only 100 senators, 2 from each state. They serve 6-year terms, and they must be at least 30 years old, a citizen for 9 years, and a legal resident of their state. Their primary job is to offer advice and consent to the president, so they help to advise on treaties, they help to advise on cabinet members and political appointments, they try the impeachment cases, and they ratify treaties. So their primary goal or job is much more closely related to the president and the functions of the president than the House, which is much more focused on money and revenue sort of issues. So the final thing that we'll take a look at is the membership of Congress. So who are the people that are in Congress? And it's important to know that Congress is more diverse than they have ever been. So Congress is significantly more diverse than they have ever been before. However, they still are whiter, older, and better educated than the population at large. Almost every member of Congress has a bachelor's degree. 2/3 have an advanced degree, so either a master's or a doctorate of some sort. Many are personally wealthy, and most have held office prior to being elected to Congress. That's much more common in the Senate than it is in the House. The average age of a House of Representatives member is 57. The average age of a senator is 63. So they are older and more educated, and the more important thing is they don't necessarily represent the makeup of the country well. So women make up more than half of the members of our population, but they make up less than 1/5 of the membership of Congress. And you can see that there's no minority group where the number of congressmen is proportional to the sort of number in the population. So that's the challenge. Should Congress look more like the public looks? Is there a benefit to having a more diverse Congress? Is there a benefit to having a more efficient or a more sort of representative Congress? Or does the race and gender of Congress people not matter as long as they're doing their job and representing the will of the people? Compensation is also important to understand. So in 2011, they did a compensation study in Congress and found that the average Congress member received approximately $174,000 a year. Leadership earns higher salaries. Just as a point of reference, the salary of the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader is more than the President makes. Under federal law enacted in 1989, lawmakers get an annual cost of living increase. So every year their salary goes up unless both chambers of Congress agree not to raise their salary. They also have several fringe benefits. So they get money to travel to cover their travel home. They travel abroad for free as long as they're on official business. They get free parking on Capitol Hill, free long distance calling, which is less of a big deal now that we all have cell phones, and the franking privilege, which allows congressmen to use to write their name as postage. In addition, they receive an allowance. So they receive a pot of money for salaries. They receive a pot of money for office expenses. They also are able to get money to sort of build up, their home offices and their office on Capitol Hill. So most of them have an office both in Capitol Hill in DC and in their home state. They're able to deduct some costs on their taxes, and they have really great pensions where they're able to retire with full federal pension at 62 if they serve for 5 years and at 50 if they've served for 20 years. Now, that might seem like a long time, but you have to remember that congressmen get reelected at about a 90 to 92% clip. So once you get into Congress, staying in Congress is actually relatively easy. So that is Congress in a nutshell. And the thing that I want you to remember is that Congress is a powerful branch of government, but it also is a slow and deliberate branch of government. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or ask me in class. I hope that this was informative and helpful to you. We'll go over some of this in class again, but I wanted you to have this as a resource to be able to watch on your own time and maybe be able to stop and pause and take notes, whatever works best for you. All right? Thank you for watching the video. If you have any questions, again, email me. I'll see you in class.